Chers amis, dear friends, I think we are nearing the opening of this discussion. So I would like to welcome you to Alliance Française of The Hague. Very warm welcome. You're indeed so brave. I can see Mr. Jimmy Mbabazi walking in, so he can take the seat next to Mireille, waiting for him. So that's great. So I'm starting in English because I would like to ask the question, who can understand French or speak French fluently? Can. Yes. So, you are a majority, but there is still a very high level of people who can't. So, je vais devoir panacher. Nous allons parler un peu en français et davantage en anglais pour un souci d'inclusivité. Bien sûr, le français reste la 4e langue la plus parlée au monde, que la 4e place. Nous ne sommes même pas sur le podium des grands vainqueurs. Donc, l'anglais va quand même prendre sa place, même si nous allons parler sous le contrôle de notre directrice des cours, Madame Anne-Sophie Dodentin, et le directeur de notre centre d'examen, Monsieur Laurent Bougnot. Donc, si vous avez envie de passer au niveau supérieur en français, vous pourrez aller les rencontrer après cette table ronde, bien sûr. Ayant dit cela, I will now revert to English for everyone to be together. Although, as we know, we are in Europe, united in diversity. So we planned this celebration of the European Day, International European Day, 9th of May, together on the initiative of our great ambassadors for youth who are sitting on this panel today, namely Mrs. Maëlle Nativel on my left, who is a student also in international relations here in Leiden University, and Juliette Vidal-Pessel, who is studying in France, also international studies, but Europeanly really focused. So we have 2 Europhiles here who are framing this panel, a young generation, young ladies in their 20s, and this is very symbolic that they should be sitting on this panel, and they took the initiative of this panel. We are very honored by the very distinguished presence of our prestigious guests who are sitting with us today. Namely, you have the names and the titles of everybody here around me. You have Mr. Roland Bucker, here on my right-hand side, formerly permanent representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. So a big European road, but you will tell us more about it. You didn't have only this title in your European life. You will share with us more. Equally, Mr. Mika Markus Leinonen on my left-hand side, representative of the European Union to international organization and liaison officer specializing in security issues. And I know this is so important for the delegation of young people who come from the IHEDN, l'Institut des Hautes Études de la Défense Nationale from France, but internationally, and this is the Dutch chapter represented here through its chair lady, and framed by her 2 colleagues as well here. So this is a great honor to have you around. And last but not least, on my right-hand side, you see Dr. Maxine David, professor at Leiden University, foreign policy analyst and specializing in Russian and EU foreign policy. As you can see here, we wanted to touch the heart of what is sensitive today in our lives, at the heart of the European continent. We didn't want to use la langue de bois. We wanted to touch on what is sensitive, again, as I said it. So we have asked Aurélien Quest, who is also an international student with us, if he could play for us the European hymn. We hadn't planned it yet, but I think it's wonderful if we can play it. It's the l'Ode à la joie, comme vous le savez. I think it says everything about the pattern, the plan of the founding fathers and maybe mothers, some of them, of the European Union. It was about making joy of the people very sacred. We are going to stand. And we're very privileged to have the European flag with us, brought yesterday in this very location by the Cyprus ambassador to the Netherlands, because as you do know, Cyprus is currently the chair of the European Union. So we're very privileged to have the flag with us. And in the next room, you have Cyprus flag as well. And the cocktail offered to you afterwards is from Cyprus as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we're happy to host Inge Marit, who has just joined us as well. Thank you so much, Aurélien. So, really, being welcomed by this hymn does bring, of course, the spirit of Robert Schumann amongst us. We have here a little hologram of him that I brought from Cichazel, his home. And of course, it's also his resting place. Many of you visited Cichazel near Metz in France, but if you haven't, I really invite you to go there. It's such a very special place. On May the 9th, 1950, Robert Schumann presented what became known as the Schuman Declaration, a founding moment in the construction of Europe built on the idea that lasting peace can be achieved through cooperation and shared institutions, including amongst nations that did share an incredible bloodshed, as you know, over many, many decades. This date is now celebrated every year as Europe Day, a reminder of the values of peace, unity, and solidarity that lie at the heart of the European project. It also echoes the spirit of the Hague Congress of 1948, and I know Juliette is very attached to this landing date, whose anniversary we commemorate today, a decisive step in imagining a united and peaceful Europe after the devastation of war. So here in The Hague, we definitely are at the crossroad of this European project. And it may sound banal, maybe to a lot of Europeans, especially young people, that we are enjoying such a legacy of peace. But I often love to narrate my encounter with two global leaders who are not European. One is Archbishop Desmond Tutu. When I met him in Cape Town a couple of years before his passing away, I was celebrating Christmas at his house. And he told me, when I look at you, I keep faith in humanity. And I said, how is that? He said, because I'm very, very sad to see so many conflicts still outraging in South Africa and in Africa. But when I look at the European continent or area of the world, I see that you too had incredible wars that were devastating, but you made it. You made it to this European Union. You made it to this flag with these stars on a blue backdrop that is very spiritual flag indeed. So that touched my heart very deeply, and I felt as a European, we have a legacy we need to cherish, protect, and really continue to nurture. And the second person I met in Dharamsala in India was His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And he said, well, I have 3 inspirations in my spiritual life. Number 1 is the Lord Buddha, which we won't be surprised about. Number 2 is Jesus Christ. So that can be a little bit more surprising for a lot of people to know that he's inspired by this figure, because he felt this is a figure of great fraternity and humanity. And the last was the European Union, which is not a person per se, but to him was also a horizon of truly spiritual evolution for humanity, that nations that were at war were able to be at peace and enjoying unity, solidarity, diversity, not wanting to crush another one, specific cultural definitions, but really wanting to respect and love each other. So this is the outset of this roundtable, and this is what we wanted to celebrate today. So on our roundtable, really much prepared by Maëlle and Juliette, I'm going to follow the path of the question that they did prepare. So our first question will be to Mika Markus Leinonen from the European Commission. A question on law. We are here at the heart of the city of justice and peace. And the first question would be, the European Union is often described as a normative power. In today's context, do norms and values still translate into real influence for peace?
Madame Directrice, tout d'abord, quelques mots en français. Je voudrais vous remercier pour cet événement et naturellement féliciter pour les 2 jeunes ambassadrices. Magnifique idée, magnifique idée. Donc, je suis vraiment ravi d'être ici aujourd'hui. Merci. 2 small things before I answer your question, if I may. So first of all, actually, I didn't know this before, but I do not represent the European Commission. I do represent the European External Action Service. Today, I'll be speaking my personal capacity, of course, reflecting also, quite a lot what the External Action Service stands for and our positions. But when you hear me speak, then it is under Chatham House rules, just to make it clear. Thank you. And as for the question, yes, it's a good thing to start with this kind of question in The Hague, with so many established pillars of the international legal order. And, when I was analyzing that, what should I answer? Then, of course, I got stuck with the word peace. That what does peace actually, first of all, mean? How do we define it? It is is it simply something which is, something which is only, short of outright war, or perhaps other definition? But in any case, I'm not going to stuck with that one. But yes, I would say that norms and values still translate into, they are influencing the world and peace, and bringing this actually to the European Union, which is perhaps the topic here today. European Union yields enormous influence in many ways, defending democracy, human rights, having all kinds of solidarity acts around the world through ECHO services. We are the biggest provider of humanitarian assistance. So European Union is at the same time as a normative power, but it is a soft power. And now that we are adding to it a defense and military dimension, so I would say that Europe, we have not yet seen the full capacity of what European Union has in order to uphold law in general and international law. Thank you. I was trying to be short. Yeah.
It's a wonderful outset and framing of the context, and also how really the European Union is the framework that holds it together. So thank you so much, Mika Marcus, for this very sharp and precise introduction. Turning precisely, you touched on human rights, to Roland Becker. The Council of Europe focuses precisely on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. In your view, how essential are these principles to maintaining peace in Europe? And how does the European Council add to what the other organizations of the European Union do already?
Merci beaucoup, Hélène. Et moi aussi, je voudrais vous remercier tout pleinement pour cette invitation honorable que je suis très heureux de répondre positivement, même au samedi. As to your question, it is, in fact, when we speak about the Council of Europe, be careful, don't say European Council, that's the European Union. This is the basic question. Why? Because the Council of Europe was created out of a longing for peace. And I cannot fail to say, there has been a reference to the Schuman Declaration of 1950. The Council of Europe already existed in 1950, I can tell you. It was created in 1949, and therefore the Congress of The Hague was indeed a very important constituent moment for the creation of the Council of Europe. Somebody like Winston Churchill from the United Kingdom, as we all know, which unfortunately is no longer a member state of the European Union, but he played a decisive role in bringing together the countries that at the time created the Council of Europe. Just emerging from this longing for peace to avoid that the European neighbors would ever again fight each other. We all know that in subsequent years, through, shall I say, a more economic route, coal and steel, first of all, of course, and then the whole build-up of the European Union, European cooperation and European integration has taken a different route, but all along the Council of Europe remained in existence and sometimes silently did its work. And coming back to the year 1950 of the Schuman Declaration, that was also the year when the Council of Europe already managed to write on paper the European Convention on Human Rights, which is the crucial basic document, I should say, of the Council of Europe, and which has flourished. I have no difficulty in saying that in the past, more than 75 years. You've all heard of the European Court of Human Rights, which is the main instrument of the convention. And Hélène, you challenged me to say a bit more about my previous responsibilities before being called to represent the Netherlands in Strasbourg. I was already in a kind of way representing my country as the government agent to the European Court of Human Rights. So all the Dutch cases that have been in the court have gone through my hands during some 20 years or so. Turning back to the question, the role of the Council of Europe for Peace in Europe has been essential in my view. We all know that for decades, Europe was Western Europe. That was true for the European Union. That was true for the Council of Europe as well. There was this dividing line, and come 1989, the Council of Europe started to see an influx, as did the European Union, an influx of the other Europe, so to speak. up until the Russian Federation in the end. I don't think I should now open the debate on the Russian Federation. I'm sure there will be reference to it, but it has been a member of the Council of Europe for 25 years, and unfortunately we all know how that ended. But nevertheless, the Council of Europe, with all its instruments, I mentioned the court, but there are many more that I can refer to. I will try to be a bit brief now because I have the feeling I'm already speaking too long, but there are many more of those, and I'm sure that during the debate we'll come back to these. I think it is important. Peace is not only two soldiers fighting each other from two sides, just to trivialize it a little bit, but as we all know, in this day and age, war and hostility encompasses many hybrid forms of warfare, where guns and tanks are maybe not the best answer. What you need is genuine democracies that respect the rule of law and human rights, and this is precisely the bread and butter of the Council of Europe. Democracy, rule of law, human rights, and I dare you to think of a proper democracy these days that is committing an unlawful war. I cannot think of one, but maybe that is a question for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, indeed, Roland, for this very precise and clear vision of our European continent beyond institutions. And this institution, the Council of Europe, I've been there so many times in Strasbourg myself, and it's very moving indeed to see that Council of Europe was gathering more than 47 countries, if not more, 46, because of the departure of Russian Federation. But I sat there many times in the Council of the NGOs. You know, there is the Assembly of the NGOs sitting at the Council of Europe, and I was there as the Vice President of the Robert Schuman Institute on many occasions, and it was indeed such a wonderful agora to see our Russian neighbors part of our discussion, and that is a perfect introduction to now putting a question to Dr. Maxine David from Leiden University. From an academic perspective, yours, because you embrace also Russia and the Russian Federation, is Europe still fundamentally a peace project, or has its nature evolved over time? Because we see our Russian friends drifting apart, whereas initially they were really part. And when we are going in the Hague Peace Palace, we can see this incredible vase offered by Tsar Nicholas II to the peace project of the European nations, let alone and also the world nations. So what happened and where are we now?
Wow. So first of all, thank you very, very much for organizing this. And I think it's just especially important that it's young people doing something like this. At the same time, it's so nice to see an audience made up of different generations, because ultimately this is on all of us. It's just that you will be around longer to bear the consequences of whatever happens right now. I think I'm going to park Russia just for now, but I will absolutely come back to it. I do, however, just want to say that, you know, you can probably tell I'm British, and I don't want you to think that I'm maybe your typical pro-Brexit Brit. I'm definitely not. I'm here because of Brexit, unfortunately, and couldn't live the life that I had wanted to because of this. But I am going to be critical of the European Union. And so I do just really want to say I am very pro-European Union, but I am now going to be very critical of it. So the question was whether, you know, Europe is still fundamentally a peace project or has its nature evolved over time. Now, I want to challenge the premise of the question, first of all. It's certainly true that Robert Schuman spoke of a vision of a Europe that was united and one that would evolve into a federation. And the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community was about, as he said, making war between France and Germany not only unthinkable, but materially impossible. And I think the materially impossible is important to remember for where we are today and why Europe is not prepared adequately for war. But I don't think that we should forget either that Schuman was at this time the French Minister for Foreign Affairs. Just a few short years before, France had retaliated very, very violently against Algerians who were, with their ongoing war for independence, and in just a few years' time would start an 8-year war with Algeria. So when we think about Europe as a peace project, I think that we have to remember those on the outside. Perceptions really matter. And from the perspective of Algerians, but others as well outside Europe, it was laughable then, and it is laughable today to consider the European Union as a peace project. Now, if I accept the premise of the question, and honestly, I teach the EU as a peace project to start, but it is a peace project for Europe, notwithstanding the fact that Schuman talks at the beginning about world peace. So it is a bounded peace project, really. I think we also have to remember that Western Europe abandoned states on the other side of what would become the Iron Curtain, right? So 1956, Hungary and Poland, tried to throw off the Soviet yoke. And of course, we had Czechoslovakia in 1968. So again, even within Europe, this idea of Europe from 1950 being a peace project is, called into question. And I think that we do need to remember that and confront it, really, acknowledge it, because others do. And the more that we try and deny it, and you see how I'm using we, even though I'm not now part of the European Union, right? But nevertheless, if we fail to understand this, then actually I think that we are really it will be impossible to build a bigger peace project in the world. I think in terms of the evolution over time, of course it's over time, but I teach with, I'm in a very kind of multidisciplinary environment. My colleagues who teach on economics will talk about the EU not as a peace project, but about economic integration. Now, of course, Schuman meant, and others meant, for economic integration to be the means to the end of the peace project. But over time, it really has kind of morphed in some people's understandings into really an organization for economic integration and really to benefit the European states as well. So another thing to bear in mind here. In this kind of sense, I think that what Russia is doing in Ukraine and what Russia is doing in Europe more widely is not changing the European Union, all right? So Russia is not necessarily driving the European Union away from its roots if we think about this as a bounded peace project. But if we think more widely about what the EU was really, and its predecessors was really doing in terms of trying to build a peace project through economic integration as a soft power, then actually the remilitarization that we are seeing going on as a response to what Russia is doing is, of course, driving the EU away from who it wants to be, what it wants to be. And I think also that we need to remember that really the Europeans squandered decades of opportunity. Right now, when Ian Manners talked about and posited this idea of a normative power Europe, he wasn't saying that Europe was a normative power. He was saying that Europe had the potential to be a normative power, that it had a potential to behave in a way that really challenged the dominance of the modern state system and the kind of autonomy of states, the sovereignty of states at the expense of peoples. And the fact is that the Europeans haven't done that, right? Why are there 2 European states occupying 5 of the permanent seats on the UN Security Council? Why have Europeans not led the charge for reform of the United Nations in order to give voice to more states who sit there, right? And I can think of many, many examples where the EU could have been very, very vocal on the world stage, and it hasn't been. And that really needs to change if anyone is ever really going to believe that it actually is a peace project.
Thank you so much, Professor. You have already opened an incredible window of progress that we indeed have to explore. Now I'm going to turn to our youth ambassadors because they are supposed to react on each of these main big sets of questions. So Maëlle, Juliette, do you have a bouncing reaction question?
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for all speaking about this issue. I think especially for everyone, but especially for young people, it's so important to bring light onto this context and our history. We did have a few things we wanted to say, but especially we think that we should always defend the idea that we have to work for peace, especially in the European project more generally, and work for this peace continuously. Also acknowledge the past, especially in today's context, for everyone and the young generation, and that's how we will lean towards what will look like a peace project for the European Union and Europe more generally.
Reaction also?
Yeah, it's not really a reaction, but I think hearing all that also encourage people who might have doubts on European, let's say, efficiency, and also people who are also already convinced of the European development. So it's bringing, let's say, two opposing visions to really enhance a discussion and a dialogue on that, and to commit more on this issue.
Very nice. Thank you so much, dear Maëlle. So, moving, you touched upon it, Professor, security and defense. My next question to Mr. Mika Markus Leinonen. The EU has recently taken stronger steps indeed in defense and security. Can a project built on peace, as Professor Maxine said, also become a credible security actor?
Yes. First, I need to go back and give my opinion about the European Union, and as I see it strongly as a peace project. I mean, how can I, defend this point? I don't know. If you look at back, how many decades of lack of war and violence, interstate between states in Europe. I mean, how could it not be qualified as a peace project? I'm just, I'm not doubting, the facts what you put forward, but at least the end result seems to me look like a successful peace project. But we can debate that, and I don't know where the idea comes from that that the EU should have made much more noise about the reform of the UN and the Security Council and so forth. I mean, that is for me it's quite theoretic, even as a thought, because I'm so old that I've almost been there since consolidation of the foreign policy inside the European Union. The way I was the member of the first Council Secretariat team, in the first team that was actually trying to coordinate foreign policy questions amongst member states. And, we had to handpick a few where we tried to coordinate issues. And others we just left because they were not, it wasn't realistic to even think about it. But very, very, very interesting. And yes, but that would be my definition, that perhaps letting the results also speak. And but I'm sure that we will at a certain moment be able to give the floor to the audience also to join our discussion here. But as for the question, can a project built on peace also become a credible security actor? Well, yes, and because the European Union already is an actor, a security actor. And it goes beyond that one. If we talk about, if you look at the word actor, it brings to my mind a kind of a theater play where there are actors on the stage. Yeah, okay. European Union is one actor, but it's not just one actor. I mean, we are beyond being one actor. We are an active security provider, and the EU is not a security consumer. We are active security provider, and so we have all kinds of powers, soft powers, and so forth. And the world around us is obliging us actually now, but much more emphasis on the security and defense dimension. I remember, that from 1999, I was there in Helsinki summit when we defined that what would be the military dimension of the European Union. And then we went through all kinds of constructions we envisaged on paper the battle groups that we would be able to use. Well, there was no political appetite for doing that, even though we had on paper this already military capability. Even though most of the member states say and still say that their defense is mainly materialized through NATO. But that is also changing. And everything, all the change do not always happen through the institutions. If you look at what's happening now, as we speak, the so-called UK-led Joint Expeditionary Force, just last month, they actually signed an agreement between the 6 or 7 countries that belong to it of real military commitments to that they would, in case of need, they would actually deploy military forces to defend others in this group. And this is it's not in contradiction with NATO, but it's an offspring already. And this is okay. UK is there, but it is this will have an impact also in the future for how the EU does things. So and finally, what is the essential element if we because I consider that we are already a security actor. What it takes is not only the means, it's the will. It's the political will. And it's not, the agreements on paper or arrangements on paper. We can always find a way, around or forward, whatever, if you have political will. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mika Markus. Indeed, that echoes the famous quote of Sir Winston Churchill, where there is a will, there is a way. So definitely there is a will to keep safe and keep together, which is already very essential. So turning to Roland Berker, do you see a risk that increasing focus on defense could overshadow the importance of human rights and legal standards in Europe, or on the contrary, that all the security efforts are there to protect these?
Thank you, and thank you for the question. First of all, I'm happy I do not have to take a stance on the question whether the EU is a peace project or not. I leave that to my two fellow speakers here, because one thing is clear: the Council of Europe is a peace project, and I dare anyone to contest that position. That said, your question, if there's a risk of the focus on defense for soft powers as human rights, democracy, and rule of law. Of course, I understand the question, because in a situation of classic warfare, all kinds of rights have been limited in the past, are limited in the present around the world, unfortunately, and even theoretically, you can very well imagine certain rights cannot be fully exercised in time of warfare. I don't think I need to mention any examples. You can think of them by yourself. So vigilance in that sense is definitely required. I come back to the European Convention on Human Rights that I mentioned before, which has foreseen all this in its Article 15, which is about situations of emergency and which spells out exactly which rights may never be curtailed, such as the right, the prohibition of torture, for example. There can never be a justification for that, and there are a number of other rights that can never be departed from, not even in times of war. But that said, the Convention envisages a situation where in times of war, emergency, certain rights may be curtailed. So yes, there is that risk, and yes, utmost vigilance is required. But that said, I come back to what I've said before. Warfare these days is not what it used to be in the good old times. That is something you should not quote me on, but is much more complicated now. And in order to combat that kind of warfare, the emphasis on human rights, on the rule of law, on democracy is extremely important. That is what we are trying to defend. Even if we would send out troops anywhere in the world, the reason would be to defend those soft values, as I call them. Let me also give you an example of the opposite situation where, and I'm referring to Hungary under Orban, which is a telling example. Hungary was not aggressive under Orban. On the contrary, it didn't want to participate in the support for Ukraine. So Hungary was staying far away from any kind of classic warfare, if you will. But what about human rights and rule of law and democracy within the country? It did not flourish. We all hope it will take a more positive route now, and I'm quite optimistic about that. Even though I'm not a specialist in Hungarian matters, of course, but so it's not always a black and white situation. Let's not forget that. I think I've answered your question more or less.
You did indeed, dear Roland. So thank you so much. Very clearly outsetting the lines. Turning to Dr. Maxine David, how do you assess Europe's role in international security today, especially in relation to NATO, as mentioned earlier, and other international actors?
Thank you. So the short answer is necessarily growing, but still insufficient. I want to come back to the UN Security Council and say, of course it matters. The reason why we have certain wars going on and hundreds of thousands of people dying is because the UN Security Council is not doing its job. And it's not doing its job because of the structure of the Security Council. So it matters, and the Europeans could have been more of a force for change, right? I mean, I just think that is undeniable. If I think about, where Europe is in international security today. So first of all, let's think about what makes us secure. And, and I think that it is that we maybe spend a bit too much time thinking about what the Europeans are doing elsewhere, so kind of external, rather than thinking about what is happening within Europe today that is actually giving permission for all kinds of things to happen to certain groups of people in the world. What we know about conflict is that those who suffer the most disproportionately are women and children. And then if I think about misogyny within Europe, Hungary throwing out, don't teach gender studies, right? Throwing out a great university, essentially, then I think that actually, there isn't enough conversation about this. If I think about conversations about race within Europe and the messages that are sent out about who is important, who is not important as well, then I no, we are not doing well at all. If we think about other drivers of conflict, climate change, what are we seeing? The EU is going backwards, not forwards on this. Migration, huge issue, obviously, in Europe. What drives migration? Climate change is one of those drivers. So here we are. We want to keep people out. We want to keep brown and black people out, primarily, by the way. Look at how we kind of like treated refugees from Ukraine versus refugees from Syria, for instance, right? We did not embrace them in the same way. The TPD, the Temporary Protection Directive, from the early 2000s was only triggered, right, for the Ukrainians, but it hadn't been for all of those people before. So let's be honest about the fact that, there are lots of conflicts going on in the world. The Europeans have got some role to play in terms of their domestic policies, and they are not doing them because they are not thinking or not acknowledging sufficiently these kinds of drivers of conflict and having proper debates within their own societies that mean that we can embrace those who are being affected by what we are doing elsewhere. Right, I am a Russia specialist, and what I will say is that the Europeans may not think that they are at war with Russia, but Russia is at war with us. Right, that is just a fact. And actually, young people are a huge target here, both in terms of information, but if we think about these acts of sabotage that have been going on as well. So there are many, many ways that Russia attacks Europe. The Europe to its west, because I do think of Russia as European, and we are not paying sufficient attention even now. Right, so there has been the kind of like awakening and everything else, but we still see conversations about those who kind of like talk about how we need to confront the Russian threat as warmongers. I think that the European, if I think about something like Israel, Gaza, and then I think about this peace project and also what it's kind of premised on. And it was really premised on this idea of never again, wasn't it? Right? It wasn't just about France and Germany. It's a big part of it. But it was never again for the Holocaust. And we have, as Europeans, actually sat back and watched the genocide. It's right, at best, it's an ethnic cleansing. Right? If we think about a hierarchy in these crimes, we have sat back and we have actually defended what has been done to the Gazan population. And actually, now we're kind of waking up to things because of Iran and everything and Lebanon and whatnot. But Europeans sat back. So what's the European role in international security today? Yeah, growing, because we want to protect our interests, but really insufficient if we are thinking about protecting other vulnerable people elsewhere. And by the way, again, I just want to kind of like really emphasize, if we want to stop people from these other countries coming to Europe, then we should be dealing with these conflicts and trying to build peace in those countries much more. And just one thing on aid as well. Yes, the European Union does quite a lot here, but we're also seeing member states
Thank you for touching on so many sensitive and very delicate issues that are all at the back of our mind when we are thinking globally. So thank you so much for browsing on them. There was a rebound question to Roland Baker here. In recent years, we have seen challenges to the rule of law in several European countries. You have mentioned some of them in your first answer. Do these developments pose a direct risk to peace in Europe? Maybe it's asking you to repeat some of the elements that you already touched on, but maybe bouncing on what Professor just said.
Thank you very much. Yes, I mentioned Hungary as an example of a country which has been particularly destructive in terms of human rights, rule of law, democracy, but not so much a threat to peace either in Europe. Or you can, of course, argue that by not supporting Ukraine, they contribute to the continuation of the war. Yes. As the professor just said, Russia is also Europe. I take the same position in calling it that. And I deplore the day that we were left with no other option, and I may say we because I was still in Strasbourg at the time, had no other option than to expel them from the organization. It gave us no pleasure whatsoever, but like I said, there was no other option. And of course, the fact that the rule of law and human rights and democracy in Russia are virtually non-existent. They bring about a threat to the peace, because only because of all that the Russian president was in a position to attack a perfectly peaceful neighboring country. So yes, that threat is there. And there was something else I wanted to say, but which I have now forgotten. In any case, what I've said before is that genuine democracies that respect the rule of law and human rights do not fight. So in its endeavors to uphold these three norms: human rights, rule of law, and democracy, the Council of Europe plays a big role in upholding peace. Perhaps what I should say, and this is what I want to mention, is that recently the Council of Europe has taken upon itself an important role in securing accountability for Ukraine. And Ukraine, of course, is a member state of the Council of Europe. And there is work going on currently, not only on a special tribunal for the crime of aggression, which is to be located here in The Hague when it's created, and which is intended to prosecute the Russian leadership if ever that is an issue. Well, it's an issue now, but whenever it's feasible. And a second strand in all this work is compensation for Ukrainian citizens. There, here in The Hague, there is already a register of damage for Ukraine, where Ukrainians can submit their claims for any damage that they have incurred, be it physical damage, mental damage, financial damage, anything. They can register in this organization, which is already in existence. It's up and running. And the next stages are being developed now. There has to be some kind of scrutiny of all their claims. And finally, there has to be payment of their claims, of course. And this is the most tricky question. And we're not there yet. It's going to take a while, I'm afraid. But these developments are going on under the auspices of the Council of Europe, which is an undertaking that requires a lot of vision and goodwill. Of course, it's easy to all lean back and say, what's it all good for? It's not going to lead to anything, and Russia is never going to change. and we're never going to get hold of Mr. Putin or his direct allies. That is one reaction. But mine is no. We should, as international community, we should stand up and do whatever is required from us, looking at the longer future, when hopefully at a certain point in time there will be a different Russian leadership, when the world looks different from what it does now. And I'm also saying this in response to the comments made by the professor on my left, that Europe is not doing enough. I should say it. I mean, I cannot disagree with you on that, especially when it concerns the Security Council. But, for example, when it is about accountability for Ukraine, it is mainly the European states that act. They are supported by some others. We used to have the United States among us, but, well, since the arrival of the current president, that has become a bit more difficult. But there have been countries around the world, including a few African, Asian, and Latin American countries, but the driving force were still the European countries. Of course, that is logical, because this is a war in Europe. So this is completely understandable, logical, and even necessary. But I wanted to make this point to show you that there are definitely developments ongoing, even if they don't make it to the headlines every day.
So I just really want to kind of underline that, I think it is incredibly important that there is this kind of pursuit of accountability, because we too often just, when we think about states, when we think about Russia, we think about the Kremlin, but there are ordinary people there who are victims of the Kremlin. And it is, so for so long, the Council of Europe was really the only place where those people could get redress for what was being done against them in their own state. And I think that the decision to expel Russia was completely right, but it was also, I agree, it was totally regrettable. But now it will, in the future, when hopefully we have a different Russia, it will be very, very important that the Russian public remember that ultimately they were being fought for, right, in terms of this accountability as well. Because at the moment, public opinion in Russia is very, very low in terms of support for the Europeans and European Union. That is a lot to do with kind of like messaging within, but this type of thing will become very important to point to as something like, we were still trying to defend you, even when we couldn't do so much else. Of course.
Last week, the European Parliament passed a resolution and also ratified for the European Union part the Claims Commission participation of the European Union. And before that, the European Union pledged 10 million euros in order to establish the skeleton of the special tribunal. So the European Union fully embraces this effort, what has happened now shows the urgency of the issue, that really has to be done. It is regrettable that there has been not that much interest from beyond European. That's a fact. But it is. What happens in Ukraine is clearly perceived as a European problem and a European war. The same applies in other situations. If you look at the International Criminal Court, then most of the cases from there are from Africa, most of them. And the Africans say, well, not all, but many of them say that these are the most important issues, and not necessarily us, the Europeans, are the first ones to speak. So, it's in a way natural that the closer things happen to you, that you are, it's more on your priority list. But at least Ukraine is very close to our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mia. A reaction from our youth ambassadors to these questions around the seal of law.
Working, yeah. Okay. It's maybe more a question for Dr. David. So you talked about Gaza, you talked about the immigration that was different from the refugees from Syria and Ukraine and all. But in your opinion, what should we modify in Europe or in the EU institution to get a bigger place on security issues or to more embrace our peace projects?
I think that it's kind of answered in the we are here because you were there argument, right? Just being attacked. Yeah. And this is different, right? Other parts of the world did not have countries that were going out and colonizing other countries. Yes, it is natural that we would be looking after Ukraine, but let's not forget that France and the UK led the charge on a very misguided liberal intervention in Libya, for instance. And then we walked away and left everybody else to deal with the consequences. So in this sense, these are our wars because we were out there fighting them and sometimes instigating them. So one of the things that we have to do is to confront, again, this kind of colonial legacy. We can have lots of arguments about whether or not the intentions were good in Libya and in other places. But the fact is that we didn't have a plan and we didn't stay in there for the duration and we didn't give them the help that they needed afterwards to rebuild the country. So, okay, then let's stop intervening in these, or if we do, let's do it in a more collaborative way that actually empowers other regional actors who, there are plenty of regional actors who are just under-resourced. So let's give them the resources that they need for a start, or otherwise just let's stay out of things that are not European altogether. But we can't have it always. We can't just kind of like dip our toes into different places where it suits us and then walk away when the kind of consequences become too costly for us.
Thank you so much, Professor. So much wisdom spoken here. Juliette, any reaction from your part?
Of course, yes. I will say it is always very interesting to delve into the questions of security and defense, because we often think that more security or more defense will necessarily equal less human rights, less defense for the democracy. Well, it is a risk. But the actions like the Council of Europe for accountability for Ukraine makes us want to engage in structures that will rely on democracy and the defense of human rights to ensure the security and more globally ensure the security for the rest of the world as well, and not only security that is intern to Europe. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Juliette. Unless you would like to react, Professor. Thank you so much, dear Juliette. It's very interesting from a point of view of generation. The way you think is not necessarily the way I think. When you say you don't feel that defense and security equates democracy, I come from a generation that believes it does. So you see, it's interesting. But you are the children of peace. You are the children of peace. So you think it's not necessary to have, defense to protect democracy and human rights and rule of law. And it's very, very interesting to explore all this together. So turning to economy, we talked about defending interests and mainly we feel we are embodied in different areas of the world, and there is this kind of very selfish human attitude. Let's protect our own garden and let's see beyond, maybe not, maybe yes, putting it very grossly. So questions on economy to Mika Marcus Leinonen. At a time of growing nationalism and internal divisions, how does the EU maintain unity as a foundation for peace?
Well, first of all, I noticed that we are already over time, and so I'll be really extremely short. And also because actually now I realized I didn't know this before, that this is about economy. So I have no competence in those questions. But trying to answer the question on how the EU could maintain unity as such on economy or other policy areas. I think we should not, in my mind, we should not confuse unity with unanimity. I mean, in order to go forward, it is important that in more areas than in certain economic questions, that we actually can move forward as European Union through qualified majority voting. This is an absolute must to introduce in security and defense issues also. So, so that was the first part, and then of course, I mean, and this is about economy also, to maintain this unity. I mean, first of all, there has to be a perception from, in particular, from the citizens, that there is added value for them from being a member of the European Union and going forward. And the same applies for to states. I mean, enlargement has been the key means for extending an area of peace and increasing prosperity in Europe. So there has to be a kind of a assurances that this solidarity effect will continue, and that there will be further transfers of wealth towards the East. But I leave it to that in short.
Very clear. Thank you so much for making it cheap and sharp. And to Roland Baker, precisely, how can economic cooperation across Europe strengthen long-term stability and prevent conflict with the Council of Europe Development Bank, for instance?
Thank you for the question. I think by mentioning the bank, you make it slightly bigger than it actually is. I would not. I mean, the Council of Europe Development Bank is a niche bank. It's a small bank, and the board is composed of all the ambassadors in Strasbourg, which is a large group. So. I mean, I do not want to belittle the bank. It is an important element in the crown of the Council of Europe, if you will. What it does is it funds social projects, including social housing, for example, throughout all the member states. So this is important, but I would not say that it is as pervasive as being able to really drive economic development in general. But another important element, and I will just only limit myself to that, because the Council of Europe as such does not have any economic mandate, but what it does, for example, is combat corruption. It has a very active system for combating corruption, controlling, monitoring the situation of corruption in all the member states, to give recommendations, to follow up on those recommendations. There is an important group of experts which is called Greco, just for those who like to look it up. And I believe that widespread corruption, which is there in some European... There is corruption everywhere, I think, but some states suffer much more from it than others, let's put it that way. But what corruption does in any instance is to block a free economic development, and so therefore it deserves to be fought in all angles, and that's what the Council of Europe does, and that I would say is an important contribution to economic development. But again, it's not the mission of the Council of Europe to stimulate economic development as such.
Thank you so much, Roland. Well, it's very important that we iterate here in this room that corruption is to be fought against, and that all these values are the really only guarantees, warranties for peace. And thank you so much for saying that. Professor Dr. Maxine David, can economic interdependence still be considered a guarantee of peace? And my further question, which you may think is a little bit an arrogant one, why didn't we find a way to find an economic dynamic or dynamism with Russia? Could that have prevented this disaster?
Okay, so here I'm going to be very pro EU. So make a shift in your head. First of all, just in terms of for you, like all member states of the European Union, please just look at the UK. We are a cautionary tale for what happens when you leave the European Union. Right, economically speaking, there is nothing good happening there. So I commend to us, commend to you us as an example. In terms of my short answer about whether economic interdependence can still be a means for peace is no. And the reason, and both Russia and the US give us the examples. I think the EU worked very, very hard for a very, very long time to build a strong trading and many other, a relationship with Russia that was based on many things, including trade. I think, though, that probably the clue is in the interdependence, right? And you do have to be mutually dependent. As it was, the EU had the upper hand with Russia in everything apart from energy. So it was a very asymmetric trading relationship. Crucially for Russia, the problem was that it couldn't make any of the rules. So there was a lot of talk about it being the rule taker and not the rule maker, really. So this was really a big problem for Russia. And actually, I have a lot of sympathy with it as well. So I do think that the EU worked very, very hard. Russia, of course, did have the upper hand in terms of energy, but it also weaponized that energy as well. And so it became very difficult for the EU to trust it, on energy or anything much else. But I would still kind of say maybe despite all of the efforts, what didn't happen was true interdependence, and that explains quite a lot. I'm not sure it would have made any difference with an actor like Russia, where status, prestige, position on the world stage is perhaps the most important thing, right? So I think the nature of the Russia that the EU was having to deal with meant that it just wasn't going to work anyway. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, right? And then we see with the US as well, right? Here is our ally doing what it is doing. So I think that, I'm not an economist, but if I were an economist, I would be kind of asking a lot of searching questions now about whether actually too much interdependence is a bad thing in as much as it gives other actors some leverage over you.
Clear and mind compelling. So maybe Juliette, a reaction on this economic dimension of our European Union.
Yes, actually, I think I'm going to ask Dr. Maxine David, but it is quite an open question because initially unity was thought through economic interdependence. Is there today another factor that can make this unity in Europe
greater? Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say that within the EU, the economic interdependence works pretty well, right? We've had, maybe not in times of crisis, right? So we saw Germany and Greece, for instance, kind of going at it. But I do think that that's just a kind of like a period of learning has to take place as well. So I think it works pretty well within the European Union. It's just externally, right? So again, I'm just kind of like really holding Schuman to his vision, which was Europe was the starting place, but it wasn't the end, right? And so I would say outside, I have more problem with it, but actually, yeah, not bad. I think within the European Union. I really wish my colleague Vera were here to say that.
Thank you so much, Professor. Maybe, Maël, a reaction on the economic side, or you want to skip that one? You'll skip that one. Okay, great. So then we're going to move to the last leg of this European dimension. And here, of all places in the Alliance Française, questions on culture. So, Dr. Maxine David, what role can culture, education, and shared identity play in sustaining peace in Europe, according to you?
Okay, I really want to thank you for this question, particularly, obviously, doing what I do. But culture and education are so important, right? I definitely think that the Europeans need to do much, much more in terms of security and defense. But I would absolutely define defense much more widely and say that education is so important here. Also, in terms of like, so to me, the kind of like big thing that is really missing for the European Union is that nobody makes films about it or TV series, right? We need a good film, a good TV series where it brings it into our living rooms. I mean, I learned, I mean, it's probably all wrong, but I felt like I learned so much from Danish politics with the series Borgen, for instance, right? You know, and I was just kind of like, she was then going to go on to work in the European Union. I was like, great, we're going to have a series. And then they didn't do it. So I do actually think that this is the kind of thing that is so important for making the European Union into a living, breathing thing rather than an abstract technocratic thing. So if there are any filmmakers here, please make a wonderful film or series about the European Union and bring it into everybody's living rooms where we can see it warts and all, but where we can really kind of connect. I do think, though, that the European Union does quite a lot here as well, very, very successfully, albeit, you know, rather low key. In terms of kinds of lots of funding of cultural exhibits, and you know, every time we go to Brussels, we go to Boyard, for instance. So and again, I think these. I just want to give you a little anecdote. All right, you know, I'm mixed race, so just in case you're wondering if it's a suntan or why I bang on about race, but I am mixed race. But I want to just tell you a tiny little anecdote about when I went to the Maurits house for the first time, and there is a painting in there of two brown people. And I stood staring at this. It's a tiny museum, right? You know, the Maurits house is lovely, but it's tiny. And there's this painting of two brown people, like they're represented in Europe. And I stood there for ages, just kind of staring at it, going like, when was this? Who were these people? And isn't it fascinating? And then this black woman came and stood right beside me. And she also was just staring. And then she said to me, can you take a photo of me with the picture? And I knew exactly what she was thinking. What she was thinking is, it is remarkable that I am here in the heart of Europe, where we, you know, talk about black and brown people as kind of like new visitors, migrants, etc. to Europe. And yet here is something that was painted a long time ago, showing we were here for the longest time, right? And this I think is so important. And yeah, so I would just absolutely reify culture as a way of kind of erasing differences, reminding us that we've all been here for a very, very long time together. And then education, of course. And it isn't about teaching. You can hear I'm very, very critical of the EU, right? I love the European Union. One of the, you know, great tragedies of my life is actually being stripped of my European citizenship. And that is what it felt. I don't teach Brexit anymore because I can't do it without crying for thinking about what was taken away from me and all of the generations that were to follow. And crucially, by the way, what was not defended with it by the European Union. This is something we don't talk about enough. But for me, the education, you know, I have applied for and been granted Jean Monnet money to, you know, run a module. I am a coordinator of an Erasmus Mundus program. The EU puts so much money into education, and it does it in a completely critical way. It's just like we will fund you, you teach what you like. It doesn't sit over us. It doesn't kind of like monitor us. It doesn't tell us what to put in it or anything else. It just works from the premise that education is important. We need to fund international students as well so that they can come and live in Europe and experience the good things, the bad things, and everything else. And it absolutely puts its money where its mouth is. And it is incredibly important, not only for those students who come from far away and sit in the classrooms, but for the Dutch students, since I'm teaching, largely here, who have to sit and listen to what other people think about Europe, the European Union, and Europeans as well. That is the kind of thing that will make ultimately the world a much, much better place. So, yeah, incredibly important, and absolute kudos to the EU in this regard.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor, for this fantastic acknowledgement. And turning precisely to Mika Markus Leinonen, how can the EU promote peace in relations with its neighbors, particularly in Eastern Europe, through that cultural spectrum?
Yet another area where I've not been active. I mean, most of my career I've been dealing with the security and defense, so this is very difficult. But first of all, I mean, the Eastern Europe, we need to then make the difference between between Russia and then the others, most of whom are candidate countries. And I can only say that the European Union has 145 embassies, so which we call delegations around the world. And I've seen their reality. I mean, one of their best tools actually in promoting Europe and peace and our values is actually through cultural diplomacy. Unfortunately, we are living times when the budgets are every year smaller and smaller. And I know that the EU ambassadors are complaining about that one, that they are deprived of one of their main tools. Well, then at the state level, yes, the European Union, I think we do a pretty good job in supporting education and cultural events. But we need to keep in mind that not to give the impression that we somehow set, what kind of culture, what is done inside in the Eastern countries. It's very important that they don't get the wrong idea that it is cultural imperialism. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that enlightenment, dear Mika Markus. And turning to Roland Baker for the last question of this round, what concrete role does the Council of Europe play today in conflict prevention and democratic resilience through the prism of culture?
Thank you very much. And let me first say that I can only concur wholeheartedly with the rather emotional words, in fact, of Professor David on the importance of cultural exchange, of education. These are definitely areas in which the Council of Europe is very active. Somewhat to my shame, I should say that many of the people that I have met in the many years that I've been working in and around the Council of Europe were, like myself, lawyers. And we are not automatically driven by considerations of culture, education, cooperation, and so on and so forth. I've referred to the European Court of Human Rights and to other important instruments of the Council of Europe, which are the ones that are most widespread. But there are definitely important elements in the work of the Council of Europe that come close to the area of culture. And talking about films, and I think that was an excellent suggestion of you to call for a European film, in fact. Now, I have some good news in the sense that the Council of Europe has already for a long time. It's not news, really. But maybe not everybody knows this, has a film fund which is called Eurimage. And I think they do a wonderful job by funding European films. And a European film is a film that is connected somehow to a certain minimum number of member states of the Council of Europe, like 3 states or so. It has to be, well, I won't go into details. I've seen many of their products. Coming from having been born in the 50s, I was mostly raised with America, the United States, as the cradle of films. We were all mesmerized for decades here in the Netherlands and perhaps also in other countries by what came from the United States. That was always good. I must say that in recent years I have somewhat changed my preference, but that was also very much driven by my years in Strasbourg, by watching films coming from Iceland or Moldova or places in the north and the south, and really wonderful products. So I can only stimulate you to look for European films, and I'm happy to say that my government funds this Eurimage, this European Film Fund. So that's an important element. Another one, and I'm now looking particularly at the students and the young people in the room, the Youth Center of the Council of Europe, which is an extremely active organ of the Council of Europe, not always in the headlights, but they receive week in, week out, they receive groups of young people from throughout Europe and have all manner of programs. Perhaps some of you have already had some experience there. If not, I can only invite you to look it up. And then perhaps coming more back a little bit to my own legal background, an extremely important element within the Council of Europe, I believe, is the attention to national minorities. The realization that our member states, even though we live since the 19th century in a period of nation states, but we also know that since the 19th century there have been Europe has been shaken up a few times quite dramatically, and as a result of that, many of our states have people from different ethnicity. I'm not even talking about recent immigration, which is now so much in the forefront of our attention and which deserves attention, of course, but I'm also talking about developments a bit more further in the past, which still until today may pose challenges to stability in countries. And an important task of the Council of Europe is to ensure that all these national minorities through all these countries are being treated on equal footing with the majorities in their countries. I can speak about this for hours because I've been seriously involved with the issue, but I will not do that. There is the Framework Convention on National Minorities, which is an important fruit of the Council of Europe. So whoever wants to have a look at that is cordially invited to do so. But these were just a few elements of where I believe the Council of Europe plays an important role in democratic stability through, shall we say, the cultural angle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Roland, for this and very enlightening perspective on culture, again, through the Council of Europe perspective. Now, turning to Juliette and also Maëlle, you talked about film, Dr. David. So I think our young people were also very thirsty and craving for films. And they launched a competition. Maybe some of you have heard about it through the network of Alliance Française located in Europe, and they've asked young people throughout these different networks to create little films, very short films, about their perspective on Europe seen from these countries. So I will leave the floor to Maëlle, and Maëlle will tell us how many of the nation answered, and we're going to be able to have a little look at these videos, and then Maëlle will explain to us, we are supposed to all vote who for the best or the ones, and so on and so forth. Maëlle, you can give us some kind of perspective on this.
Yes, well, 8 countries, 8 Alliances Françaises participated to this contest. I think we have. I'm gonna go in French if it's okay. Projects, very different videos, and I encourage you to vote for the best videos. So I guess Eloise in the back can give you some papers just to vote on paper, and then the best video is going to be shared on the Instagram of the foundation of the Alliance Française. So please enjoy all these videos.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la paix ?
Qu'est-ce qui est célébré ici, avec cette statue controversée? La paix, la guerre, c'est une question complexe à laquelle il est difficile de répondre. On n'a jamais connu les bombardements, le chaos, la peur de ne pas survivre au lendemain. Ces symboles montrent que la paix s'exprime de différentes manières. Qui veut la paix prépare la guerre.
Civis pacem para bellum. Si tu veux la paix, prépare la guerre. Je trouve cette phrase réductrice, et même fausse. Comme si le fait de préparer la guerre était la seule solution pour garantir la paix. Comme si prouver sa supériorité militaire était une manière saine d'appeler au pacifisme. Parfois, lorsque je prépare à manger, je regarde dehors et j'imagine une bombe tomber ici sur la montagne en face. Non, je ne suis pas pessimiste, et fort heureusement, je ne pense pas connaître Banska Bystrica un jour dans ces conditions. Je reconnais simplement que nous prenons parfois un peu trop la paix pour acquise, alors même que notre continent a connu plus de périodes de conflit que de périodes de paix au cours des derniers siècles. Je pense qu'en apprenant à ne pas sous-estimer le confort de vivre dans un lieu en paix, nous apprenons aussi à chercher à la garantir. Plutôt que de dire civis pacem para bellum, je dirais plutôt, si tu veux la paix, ouvre-toi à l'autre, voyage, rencontre de nouvelles personnes.
La paix est la liberté et une insouciance retrouvée. Un état d'esprit dans lequel l'âme n'a plus besoin de se poser des questions sur ce qu'il adviendra demain. Une paix d'esprit qui n'est pas forcément simple à atteindre, mais qui est nécessaire. Une paix intérieure qui a également besoin d'une paix extérieure pour exister.
Nous prospérons et florissons grâce à la paix, et également à l'Union européenne. Cette alliance est le résultat d'une confiance des pays européens entre eux, une confiance qui permet de créer un immense ensemble où nous mettons en valeur la singularité et la culture de chaque pays, notamment grâce aux fonds mis à disposition. Par exemple, derrière moi, on voit une gare routière bien du 21e siècle. Mais avant 2019, l'ancien édifice brutaliste symbolisait l'arche sombre du régime autoritaire. L'Europe est un continent vaste, entretenant la diversité en nous unissant pour la paix.
For me, the European Union represents a fighting chance at progress, a fighting chance at unity, and most importantly, a fighting chance at peace.
A fighting chance which ultimately leads to the acceptance of diversity and unity throughout the countries. This leads to what I like to call a big happy family who overlooks all of their differences and works together collectively towards a better society, a brighter future, and honestly to a more equitable and honest society.
Peace isn't just a word. is the means through which life is preserved. EU is a bastion of active diplomacy that sets its goal to preserving peace on the continent, and it's our mission to help it do just that. Peace.
Europe stands for unity, diversity, and above all, peace. On Europe's Day, let's remember how important it is to build a future together in solidarity and peace.
For us, Europe represents unity. Unity in diversity, unity through tolerance, unity among nations. Maintaining peace among different people, accepting diverse cultures, and also expressing ourselves to different languages, all of this shape the Europe you know today.
The values of the European Union resound across all Europe. In Warsaw, for instance, each year there is a peace march where dozens of people take part, all of them militating for social cohesion, non-discrimination, and peace.
By choosing dialogue over conflict, a continent was torn apart by war has become a sanctuary of stability. In a fragmented world, Europe remains a constant reminder. Peace is not just the absence of war, it is the presence of unity.
We are Europe and we represent unity and peace.
Je m'appelle Babs et je viens des Pays-Bas.
Je suis Sergio et je viens de Portugal.
Moi, je m'appelle Anne et je viens du nord-est de l'Italie.
Je m'appelle Odysseas, je viens de Grèce.
Je m'appelle Irati et je viens d'Espagne.
Je m'appelle João et je viens de Portugal.
Je m'appelle Sabine, je viens du nord d'Italie. Je fais partie de la communauté germanophone.
Je trouve que ça rend l'apprentissage très intéressant. Les discussions sont plus riches parce que normalement, quand on vient de pays différents, on a des avis plus partagés.
Je trouve ça beau que pendant qu'on apprenne le français, on peut aussi apprendre des choses sur des pays différents et avoir un peu une perspective diverse.
Avoir des différentes cultures, ça m'aide à mon apprentissage parce que comme on vient de différentes langues d'origine, on a des différentes erreurs dans la langue française. Alors ça nous aide à trouver les points faibles dans notre français et les améliorer.
Je pense un échange honnête et multiculturel.
Ouverture d'esprit et d'expérience.
Une ambiance très ouverte et épanouissante.
L'échange des idées différents et très intéressant.
Weltoffenheit et cela signifie être ouvert au monde.
Filia, ça veut dire amitié.
Inspirazione, ça veut dire inspiration.
Uitwisseling, donc échange.
Curiosité en français.
Enriquecedor, ça veut dire enrichissant.
Motivation, c'est motivation.
Ok.
Mesdames, messieurs, le saviez-vous? Le cœur de la diplomatie mondiale bat son plein à Genève.
Située au cœur de l'Europe, elle est reconnue à l'international comme la capitale de la paix.
Mais pourquoi Genève est-elle considérée comme le cœur et le lieu par excellence de la médiation internationale?
De par son positionnement central et sa neutralité dans les politiques internationales, c'est le territoire idéal pour les échanges diplomatiques.
Genève s'impose en Europe comme le lieu de rassemblement qui fédère acteurs, États autour de valeurs fondamentales telles que la paix.
Cependant, la Première Guerre mondiale est venue fragiliser cet équilibre européen en fracturant les États. Ainsi, après la Première Guerre mondiale, le besoin s'est fait sentir que l'Europe se dote d'un réel organe pour la stabilité et la paix.
Le diplomate suisse William Rappard, figure de la neutralité helvétique, a contribué à l'accueil de la Société des Nations en 1920 au Palais Wilson que vous voyez derrière moi. La Société des Nations a joué un rôle central dans la paix en Europe, mais n'a pas pu contrer la montée du totalitarisme et l'avènement de la Seconde Guerre mondiale.
Après la Seconde Guerre mondiale qui a ébranlé le continent européen, il s'est avéré indispensable de mettre en place un organe capable d'assurer la paix durablement sur le continent. À partir des restes de la SDN et en gommant ses failles, les États ont créé l'ONU, dont le siège européen se trouve ici, à Genève, au Palais des Nations.
L'Organisation des Nations Unies, c'est 187 représentations permanentes d'États, et dont 54 sont européennes.
L'après-Seconde Guerre mondiale impose l'instauration des droits humanitaires complets afin de protéger chacun et chacune face aux cruautés de la guerre. Dans ce contexte, les conventions de Genève de 1949 assurent la protection et la paix des civils.
Ces 4 conventions ont été impulsées par le Suisse Max Petitpierre qui, de par son action, a imposé Genève sur la scène internationale comme le centre européen de la paix.
Cet héritage prend aujourd'hui place dans les conférences internationales toujours présentes à Genève, comme par exemple lors des récentes négociations pour la paix en Ukraine. Cette guerre, première guerre sur le sol européen depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale, a été l'une des principales préoccupations du Comité international de la Croix-Rouge présent juste ici.
Mirjana Spoljaric, première femme à présider l'organisation, œuvre depuis 2022 au maintien de la paix et à la stabilité du continent. La présence d'une femme à la tête d'une organisation mondialement reconnue illustre parfaitement l'importance des femmes, et dans ce cas précis francophones, dans les processus de maintien de la paix.
Alors, vous l'aurez compris, Genève, ce n'est pas simplement du chocolat ou du fromage, c'est une ville cosmopolite et un centre multilatéraliste européen.
Alors, si vous êtes de passage, n'oubliez pas de faire un arrêt pour découvrir son histoire et venir à notre rencontre.
Il y a 78 ans se tenait ici même le congrès de la Haye entre le 7 et le 10 mai 1948. Ce congrès a rassemblé plusieurs hauts représentants politiques qui se sont tous battus pour la paix en Europe. Ce même congrès a donné naissance 2 ans plus tard à la déclaration Schuman que nous connaissons qui a pris place le 9 mai 1950.
Quand on parle de paix en Europe, on pense souvent à l'histoire, mais ici à La Haye, elle se construit tous les jours.
Et c'est comme ça que naissent les institutions. Bienvenue à la Maison de l'Europe.
Zo, in één woord, wat is Europa voor u?
Ik denk vrede, veiligheid.
Thuiskomen, geborgenheid.
La vision de la Haye pour l'Europe, c'est légiférer ensemble.
Mais aussi de créer une communauté solidaire.
La Haye est aujourd'hui symbole de la paix par le droit, incarné par le Palais de la Paix. siège de la Cour internationale de justice. À La Haye, la paix prend forme. Et en Europe, elle prend tout son sens. Pour toi, l'Europe, en un mot, c'est quoi?
Pour moi, l'Europe, c'est la paix.
Bonjour, alors aujourd'hui nous avons interrogé un groupe de personnes autour du thème de la paix dans l'Europe. Alors voici la réponse.
En un seul mot?
Oui.
C'est compliqué ça, en un seul mot, parce que c'est un domaine vaste, la paix. La fraternité, je dirais.
La bienveillance.
Oui. Un seul mot, l'amour.
En un seul mot, je dirais que la paix représente l'amour entre les personnes.
Douceur.
Oui. Paisible, joie, être heureux, qu'il y ait de violence, pas de guerre, pas de jalousie. J'essaie d'être joyeuse autour de moi, d'être bien avec les amis, la famille, oui, voilà, dans le partage.
La gratitude.
Comme je me référerais à mon premier mot, c'est-à-dire la fraternité, c'est-à-dire pouvoir vivre ensemble, s'entendre, s'écouter, se parler, ne pas faire recours à la force.
Aujourd'hui, en Europe, ce serait la cohabitation entre tous.
Les associations, les groupes, voilà, ceux qui bataillent qui luttent pour qu'il n'y ait plus de guerre.
Effectivement, c'est une question difficile, mais l'union entre les personnes, sans ça, il n'y aura pas de paix. La violence, arrêtons avec les guerres, arrêtons avec la faim, arrêtons avec la souffrance. Voir des enfants souffrir et mourir de faim, c'est quelque chose de terrible. Et personne ne le mérite, et encore moins les enfants. Ce sont des innocents qui meurent tous les jours. Pour ça, arrêtons, vraiment, arrêtons.
It's easy if you try.
Quand je suis arrivé à Strasbourg, j'ai compris que je n'étais pas dans une ville comme les autres. Ici, l'Europe ne se raconte pas. Elle se construit, elle s'incarne. Le Parlement européen, le Conseil de l'Europe, la Cour européenne des droits de l'homme. C'est ici que ces institutions prennent vie. C'est ici que l'idée européenne s'est concrétisée. Un lieu fort, un symbole, un engagement pour des valeurs communes. La paix, les droits, le dialogue entre les peuples.
Oui, et ce qui est beau, c'est que cette Europe institutionnelle devient une expérience humaine. À l'Alliance française, je l'ai vécu au quotidien, dans les rencontres, dans les langues qui se croisent, dans les partages.
Strasbourg est au cœur de l'Europe. Géographiquement, bien sûr, mais surtout humainement. À la croisée de la France et de l'Allemagne, ouverte vers le Luxembourg, vers la Suisse, une ville de passage et de liens.
On entend toutes les langues dans les rues. On découvre d'autres cultures et on apprend à se rapprocher. C'est ça pour moi, l'Europe. Une construction vivante, une expérience de partage.
Et cette vision s'inscrit dans une histoire. Strasbourg porte une tradition humaniste forte, un héritage qui continue de guider son rôle aujourd'hui. Ici, l'avenir de l'Europe ne se pense pas seulement, il se construit concrètement.
Et tout cela dans une ville d'une grande beauté. La cathédrale, les maisons alsaciennes, les lumières, et cette douceur des vivres qui rend chaque moment précieux.
Une ville qui unit les institutions, les cultures, les personnes.
À l'Alliance française, on vit cette Europe pleinement. On apprend une langue, mais surtout, on crée des liens.
Strasbourg est bien plus qu'une capitale européenne. C'est un lieu où la paix prend forme, où les valeurs deviennent réelles, où l'Europe se construit chaque jour. et surtout où elles se partagent.
Je crois que vous avez eu le temps de voter et je crois qu'ils vont, nos jeunes collègues vont récupérer vos bulletins de vote. Très démocratique, vous voyez. Voilà. Oui, alors, je ne sais pas, est-ce qu'il faut mettre des croix, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ou mettre des notes ou quoi? Moi, j'ai mis des notes, mais enfin bon. Vous faites comme vous voulez, tout. In fact, they will find out the one you preferred and then the ones you less preferred. Maybe you have a few you preferred and then the ones who get the best rates, you can rank them, because the idea is to have to check the best one. So I did put marks on them, so you will find the best marks. Yes. You can rank them. At the end of the day, there needs to be one best one. So you can do as you wish. You can either rank them or you can choose. Ah. Okay, so it can be 1 out of 10 or 10 out of 1 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 is the best, and 1 out of 10 would be the worst, kind of thing, you know. So you can have a lot of equal. It's only 8. 8 videos. There are 8 videos. 1 out of 8. Okay. It's the best. 8 would be the best. And so on. Yes. Perfect. Sorry for not being very clear in the beginning. But if you found other ways of indicating your preference, they will find out how to. Okay, great. I will give that to you. And so we are going to wrap up. It was a long conversation, but we had wanted to give the floor to our audience. So if you want to put a few reactions, questions, commentaries while they are gathering the bulletin, please feel free to have a reaction on this roundtable, on these videos, whichever. Maybe I'll give the floor to the chair lady of the IHEDN, and then maybe Mireille, who once ran for European elections also. He's a Europhile, will be able to react on this roundtable, and other people.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you all for this conference. It was really enriching, and also as a young person, it was really interesting to see how we as a youth, we perceive Europe and how you perceive it. I mean, a bit of more maturity and, of course, but more focus on the subject. I was really interested in the subject about culture. I mean, I feel European first. I mean, I've dual nationality and I'm currently on Erasmus program. So I feel Europe and I really feel like it's really important to me. However, I think that it's a bit difficult for the everyday person, mainly in France, but also to see what Europe does for the youth. I think that we don't really know it. I mean, it stays really blurry and bureaucratical and for power. And I think it was really super interesting to see that Europe does act for the youth and that we're not left behind very important subjects. And on another just topic about more defense, as it is a bit more my expertise in my field, I feel like Europe is fundamentally a peace project, but really struggles, at least in my way, to structure itself in times of war and conflict. I mean, we've seen it mainly with the lack of political will there is, at least in my way, in my sense, to rearm Europe. It's really difficult. Countries have their own sovereignty and their own interest. I mean, we've seen it recently with Germany that signed a big contract to buy American jets instead of French jets. So we see that there's high tension and it highlights, of course, the different interests the country has. But I really think that we must have hope in the fact that Europe constructs itself in crisis and periods of really difficult, of course, conflict. And I really, really hope that we can make it and that Europe will stay a highlight for peace throughout the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this reaction. Maybe you would like to react to what was said by this young chairlady?
I don't disagree with, well, you know, with anything that you've said, but hope is really, really important. And I think that one of the things that we talk a lot about at the university is the fact that things are very depressing right now. We see high levels of anxiety among students. And a big part of that is, I think, because there doesn't seem to be anything to look forward to, you know, so economically you're not going to be as well off as your parents were. And, you know, so it's just kind of on and on and on. I will say that we are conscious of it. I've organized, I'll be going to a conference in June, and I deliberately organized a panel, a roundtable that is called Reasons to be Cheerful. So it kind of like connects culturally to a song, but absolutely, we have got to find the things that are positive, or the things that are not so positive, but where we can turn them around, and we've got to send out those messages. Absolutely, hope is without hope we're lost. So we need it.
I think "Reasons to be Cheerful" is a song by Ian Dury from the 70s. Yes. All right, I'm part one. Very good. I can only say, I think I referred once to the American president, the current American president. I think if he's done one thing right, then it's to make us Europeans aware of our importance of getting together. And this is, of course, as always in Europe, an extremely complicated process. It impacts on sovereignty, which you rightfully refer to. But I mean, I'm an optimist by nature. I believe that with falling and standing up again, and we're making progress as Europe, even though you cannot always see it, but in the long run, you can see it. Of course, I'm not speaking about climate change. That's quite a different challenge, which is, of course, for Europe also important, and that is a different issue. But when we speak about the position of Europe as a peace project, whether it was designed as a peace project or not, I leave that in the middle. But I'm quite hopeful of the developments. Thank you.
Don't know where to start. I come back to my point that in order to be able to go forward, while we get more states to join the EU, I mean, we need to find a way to either work on the current institutional setting and how we vote, or find practical ways around it. And that's going to be difficult. For example, in my country of origin, Finland, there's a coalition government, and one of the parties is anti-European. I mean, in order to get to the government, they had to renounce the idea of Finland, getting out of EU. So I suppose that's already a positive development that they are playing that they renounce their main objective. But on the other hand, all the damage that they have managed to do through the government now is unimaginable. I don't know. So much depends on what happens inside the member states. But we would need to make sure that it's the majority who wants to go forward is the one who basically decides. At the same time, if you look at the level of people, I mean, in my country, you may have seen in these happiness enquete, so 8 times number 1. So people in spite of economic difficulties and other stuff. But I would say that the people have understood the value of Europe, and especially what it means for countries that are in the the outer skirt of the that we are not in the center of Europe. So it really brings us liberties and feeling of security, that you belong to a bigger group. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this question, your reactions. Thank you so much. It's a lovely way to wrap up this roundtable, which lasted 2 hours. So big credit to all of you, our speakers. Great thanks. And to our audience, maybe Mireille, you want to put a last reaction question? You are a Dutch lady very much involved in supporting Europe all your life.
Well, thank you. I just have a cri de coeur. Like one of our former politicians used to say, stop drinking white wine on the beach. And it is time to fight for Europe, because I think we are encircled by all kind of crises. And when I was a candidate for the European Parliament in 2014, my first motto was, every child safe. Because it was the invasion of Crimea. And then it started in also the north of Africa. And if you're not safe, it is difficult. And it starts with getting to know each other. And as part of the films, they were so different. So you see everybody has its own background, its own culture, its own language. But if you don't get to know each other, there won't be peace.
Thank you so much, Mireille, for your reaction. I think we did a great work of European construction today. It was about talking about our citizenship, thinking forward, thinking ahead. We've opened quite a lot of paths of reflections for all our beautiful members of the audience. I want to express again my deepest gratitude to our young youth ambassadors, as I love to call them, in this Alliance Française, Elaya Flore, Maëlle Nativel, Juliette Vidal-Pessel, qui prépare le cocktail et qui vous attend, le cocktail offert par nos amis chypriotes, également Héloïse Landois, Maëva Boutros-Fanti qui est juste devant moi, également Marie-Lise Cloarec, je crois que j'oublie Mélissa Grali qui n'est pas loin, Aurélien Quest, je n'ai sans doute pas mentionné tout le monde. Claudia aussi, Claudia Orlac. Voilà, donc on a beaucoup de jeunes qui sont souvent bénéficiaires des bourses Erasmus+, pour venir jusqu'ici. Donc là aussi, c'est l'expression incarnée de cette Union européenne. I would love to conclude in saying that I wrote my master thesis on Europe. Of course, you wouldn't be surprised. It was about exploring the outskirts of Europe in between Switzerland, which is my second nation in terms of citizenship, and the United Kingdom. And I always felt, and I wrote it in 1993, and I was already very much conscious of these limitations so far of the European construction that we have to embrace, that we have to be one way or the other capable of adding to the richness of the European construction. You know, be it Sir Winston Churchill, we mentioned him quite many times here, or be it Denis de Rougemont, the Swiss Denis de Rougemont, who wrote the incredible book De l'amour et de l'Occident. It says absolutely all about the European project. And yet our two European nations, the UK and Switzerland, are still somehow not at the heart of the European Union. And that is not possible. As long as it is not possible, it's not achieved. So I think this is where we have to go. And of course, the European Union is not an end in itself. It's a platform to reach out much further. And I would say the limit is the sky, and the sky is here. You know, the stars and the sky. And I think this is what they had in mind. You know, these great founders, Alcide de Gasperi, Konrad Adenauer, Robert Schuman, and Jean Monnet. Each time I mention their names, it's very emotional for me as well. These people had peace at heart because they suffered so much from war. So let's carry on the project further. And thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, a great evening, and I hope you still benefit from the sunshine outside. Thank you. The results of the poll? 15 minutes during the cocktail, we'll have the answer. Okay, great. Wonderful. You'll see it online anyway. Thank you so much again.